Hello, my name is Bob Ganzak. Welcome to MotivationU, the podcast. Welcome to you here at Motivation U, the podcast, coming to you live from Spurrier's Gridiron Grill. And with me today is Jason Bennett, a recent grad with his master's degree from the University of Florida in mass communications, undergrad degree, journalism.
Journalism and communications.
After our program last week, we kind of came up with the idea, or this gentleman came up with the idea, along with Tammy Wynn, our producer, to flip the switch and have me be the guest. And that is kind of an interesting way to approach this today. So I'm going to flip things over to Jason, and he will take over the program.
Yes. Hello to all. I am Jason Bennett, a recent graduate from the University of Florida in mass communications and my undergrad in journalism to telecommunications. And I'm a producer behind the scenes for Mr. Ganzak. And now we're in front of the screen with Mr. Ganzak. In front of the screen.
This is fun because I know he's as nervous as can be. Yeah, this was your idea.
Yeah. It's my idea. And every time I've been doing Mr. Ganzak's show for about probably like a month now. And every time I would ask him questions after the show, like, how did you do this? Where did you start? And then it's always interesting to to pick Mr. Ganzak's brain, because obviously the podcast is named Motivational Use. So everything, like, sometimes I'll take things from him and I'll be like, wait, he did say that today, and it kind of motivated me. So I flipped the script on him. I was like, Mr. Ganzak, how do you feel about one of us, either me or our other producer, Tammy, to interview you, just so your audience can know who you are? Because you're always on this side of the room asking the questions instead of people getting to know who you are. So.
And first of all, you can call me Bob.
Bob.
It's
It's just a thing of calling
respect.
Yes,
I
respect.
got you, man.
Yes, sir.
I got you. Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah. So just jumping in today. So that with the interviews going, just trying to get to know Bob today. It's just a thing called. But yeah, getting to know Mr. Ganzak as we go on for today's show.
Awesome. So where do we start?
Where are we jumping in today? We're getting to know Mr. Ganzak, and who. My first question is who is Bob Ganzak?
So just it's funny. I like watching or listening to NFL radio on Sirius, and Pat Kerwin in the afternoon has a little joke on his introduction, and they said there were some football players that like weren't anything really special. They were good, but they were not special, and they called them Jags, and it stood for just a guy. So just a guy. That's all I am, is just a guy. I mean, I'm just a person that grew up in Detroit, Michigan, and the suburbs, and always cared about other people. My mom was a real influential person in my life, and so was my dad, but I'm just a guy.
Just a guy. Okay. And you brought up to my next question. Where are you originally from? Which you stated Detroit.
I was born in Detroit and lived in and outside of the city for much of my life. My dad had a company with his brother that they took over from my uncle, which was just a small little print shop, and it was just off of Wayne State University's campus. On a street called Palmer between Cass and Woodward Avenue in downtown Detroit. And so that was a big part of our life for my entire life, was going downtown. And then as I got older, I lived in the city and outside of the city and in the suburbs. and went to the University of Detroit, which was a great 5-year. I graduated in 4 years, but I spent 5 years there because I played baseball for 4 years and then was a graduate assistant for 1 year for our coach, Coach Miller. And it was just a great experience through that time.
Okay. So growing up, because now you play a big part in the community, you do a lot of things, you do a lot of motivational speaking. Growing up, what did you do? Like, because obviously when you was growing up, you didn't just say, hey, I want to be a motivational speaker, I want to be involved in the community and do this. What did you do growing up to take those steps? Or just like, as a kid, what did you take up on like hobbies and stuff like that?
Well, I played sports. Football season, I played football. In the winter, I played basketball and hockey. In the spring and the summer, it was baseball and golf. And then we did it again over and over and over again. And that's all I did. I really loved a couple of things. I loved sports, all of them. I loved music. I had 3 older sisters. I still have 3 older sisters. 2 of them have passed away, but I have 3 older sisters, and they were really into music. So I grew up loving music, and I loved radio. I used to listen to the radio all the time. Yet in our house, and in much of our community where I grew up, and the Catholic school system, I always heard little boys were to be seen and not heard. So I was extremely introverted. I mean, I was scared of my own shadow, and that affected me, greatly going through life. And I always said, if I had the opportunity, I would ... I would do something. I'm not sure what it was, but I would do something. And I guess I saw some leadership skills in myself when I played sports. There were certain times that I was usually the smallest guy on the field, and when I was younger, but I could take over and get people to do things and be more positive about themselves. And that kind of, I think, is the germ. I've never been asked that, so it's kind of the germ of where I am today.
Okay. So you say you went to college. What did you study at University of Detroit?
I was a criminal justice major.
Okay.
So I went there to play baseball. There is no, I won't even mix that. Nobody had ever graduated from college in my family. And my sister had gone to college, my oldest sister, but then dropped out after a semester. So nobody had really gone to college in our family. And I didn't, I was there to play baseball. That was it. I wanted to play baseball, and I needed to get that 2.5 GPA to stay eligible and just not mess up, right? And I mean, it was Division I baseball, and it was fun, But I wanted to get into radio, and when I went to the curriculum, I didn't understand, naive, ignorant, whatever it was, I didn't understand that you had to start someplace. I wanted to be at the end, and I didn't understand that you had to go through a process to get to the end. So when I went to the classes, they were so elementary to me, I felt like, what am I doing here? Now I know that they were building a foundation for what you would do when you were in radio. So I changed my major. I was living in the dorms, and one of the RAs, the resident, dudes, he kind of encouraged me to go into criminal justice because that's what he was in. Funny thing was, he changed, his name was Spencer. I can't think of his first name right now, but he changed from criminal justice to communications and became a fairly famous ABC, NBC newscaster. Okay. So it was kind of an interesting thing. But I switched, went into criminal justice, and that's where I got my degree.
Same likely background I had, because when I first moved to Gainesville, the college I went to was the community college around here, Santa Fe College, and I got my AA in criminal justice. But when I started college, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. But I thought of something. I was like, okay, it might be in the criminal field that I want to be in, and then so I'm just going my degree. But as I got on and I did my degree, I got the AA. I'm like, I don't think this is really what I want to do. Really, like I would like to do it, but like it's like nah, I might want to do something else. So then when going into UF, like you said with your friend, switched into the telecommunications field, and then just went from there.
Yeah.
And just went from there. So what you say, you often say you have a radio background. You've been in broadcasting. How did the radio start?
So I was working for my dad when I graduated from college. There was never a doubt that that's what I was going to. It didn't matter what I wanted to do. I was going to work for my dad. I mean that was just kind of the only son, and I hated the work. I mean I despised what we did. I didn't like doing it. The other thing I looked at it was that my uncle had 5 sons, and my dad had 1 son. And so the company was feeding 2 families at that time, my uncles and my dad's, right? And I couldn't imagine us trying to feed 6 families from this small little company. And I just told my dad I was going to leave. He was shocked. He was disappointed, I know. But I just didn't see that as my life. So I went to broadcasting school, Specs Howard School of Broadcast Arts, which is one of the top broadcasting schools in the country. It so happened to be in Southfield, Michigan, which is just outside of Detroit. And I went to school there. And the rest is history. They placed me in a job at a radio station in Lansing, and it was like somebody, just like injected something into. I absolutely loved it. I mean, I loved everything about it. I mean, I was my wife at the time, the mother of my children, probably would say I was a workaholic. But I was a junkie-holic. I mean, I loved radio. I loved the sports side of it. I loved the music side of it. I mean, it was everything that I ever wanted to do, all wrapped into one package. It was just absolutely awesome.
Were you on the broadcasting sports side or the news side for radio?
I actually started in sales and spent most of the core of what I did was in sales management and management. Though I did, a lot of the on-air things many a times under a fictitious name. I can remember for people back in Benton Harbor, Michigan, back in the early 90s, you had a weather person by the name of Storm Kennedy. That was me. I did the weather I was part of the morning show and did the weather. It's just crazy things like that that I did.
What would you take one of your best memories starting out in the radio business, like just coming out of school? What would you say your best memory was?
It would be the people I've met. I mean, so as far as working, getting my first job at a radio station, by far, WITL, Whittle FM, Whittle 1010 AM. It was a country music station in Lansing, Michigan. Obtaining that position and the people I met, I had an incredible staff around us, but there was one individual who was our program director, Johnny Austin. His name is John Mertz, but on the air he was Johnny Austin. My connection with him and the things that we did as young people just starting in the broadcast industry, he still does it. He's in Kansas City now and is still working in broadcasting, I think public television now. But I would say that event right there, just getting my first job and being in radio and just engulfing myself in it.
Okay. And like for a person like me that's in the telecommunications, camera broadcasting field, what could you explain what comes with broadcasting sales? Because there's often jobs that are out there that you look on LinkedIn and Indeed, and it's like, okay, ABC broadcasting sales. What comes with doing sales for broadcasting and radio?
Well, it's a little bit different depending on what size of the world you're in. Like the radio stations that I've worked in, the largest market that I worked in was here in Gainesville, Ocala, which is a hyphenated market, meaning that there are two small markets that they put together to make one so that they could vault themselves into the top 100 of markets in the country. Either by themselves would be way down the line, but when they put themselves together, what happens at that time is more advertising dollars are available to them because of the market size. So this is the largest market that I worked in. To answer your question, as far as small market radio stations, and I'm sure television stations or cable or what other avenues they have, it's basically relationships. Mm-hmm. You are building relationships and learning to ask questions. Mm-hmm. I mean, that little game that Tammy threw out at us, you know, that is good stuff to look at, because it's really asking questions and being focused on your customer. And most of them are a small salary plus a commission. It's a very rewarding life for a small percentage of people that really drive themselves to do that. Okay. Let me answer that another way too, though, because there's something else, that advice that I got from the vice president of the school at Specs Howard School of Broadcast Arts, Dick Kernan, who passed away a couple of years ago, one of my mentors. Dick told me one time, he said, be willing to do anything at the radio station. This was always my mindset. He said it didn't matter if you had to sweep the floors, clean the bathrooms, cut the grass, run the board, sell, whatever you had to do, be willing to do it, because those are the type of individuals that broadcasters are looking for. And with that mindset, I approached radio with that attitude. And there was never a bad day at a radio station, because whatever I was asked to do, I willingly did it, wanted to do it. And that was down the road, at the end of my career, it was not as rosy, mm-hmm. Because financial things and everything else that comes into play is you're basically working for banks and mezzanine lenders and everybody else. It was not fun. Mm-hmm. But that initial passion was just incredible. Yeah,
because often when you come out of college, like I could say when I came out of undergrad, I've seen my friends that are like heavy within the broadcasting and telecommunications field. They often think right when I get out of college, I'm just going to be on TV, and it's not that type of it's not that type of deal. You have to start low, not necessarily start low, but you just have to start somewhere where it could just get your foot in the door. Where, like you said, running the board, having to do errands for the manager, or just broadcasting, being a podcast or production assistant. That's what helps you get to the next step in advancing your career.
It's a lot, to me, if you draw parallels, it's a lot like the music industry. Mm-hmm. You hear stories, or we used to hear stories of music artists that started as a person that was selling T-shirts for some band, or they were a receptionist at a company, but they believed in themselves and they just wanted to get their foot in the door. So finding out what your passion is, what you would like to do, Jason, in your life, picture it in your mind. See yourself doing it. And if it is anchor at ESPN or whatever it is, see yourself there and put that vision in your mind, and then tell yourself, You'll take any opportunity or avenue to get yourself to that. I think the big, like I use that analogy of the singers that started selling T-shirts. They believed in themselves. They knew that their talent was something, so they weren't going to just sell T-shirts the rest of their life. In your life, and you don't have to tell everybody about it. You don't have to say, well, no, I'm doing this job and someday I'm going to be here. The only person that you need to tell that to is you. And then just go do it. Do it every day, every step, every breath, every waking moment. You are geared towards getting to where you want to be. And that would be my suggestion about that.
My suggestion. Okay. I was going to do it. I was going to bring out one of these questions from Tammy, but I'm going to ask Tammy's question in the second half. But just to spice up the podcast this morning, I'm going to pick one question from this game. That's called, what is the game called again? We're Not Really Strangers.
We're Not Really Strangers. I've never heard this game before.
I've never heard of the game before. We're going to finish off this 1, 2, 3, 4 questions that I picked up. So we're going to do probably 1 or 2 in the first half and then 2 in the second half. So just pick from which one.
So I get to ask you this question?
No, I'm going to ask you this question. This is your question I'm about to ask you. All right. Oh, this is probably an ending question, but so far from this conversation, what have you learned about yourself?
What have I learned about myself from this conversation?
Or feelings, just feelings, or just like, because you're always on this side instead of that side.
Yeah, you know, well, one thing I know is it's more comfortable being over there than over here. I guess I just have a passion to help people. Mm-hmm. I don't care who they are. I love to see people grow and get better and fulfill their dreams, whatever they are. And if I can be a small part of helping that, I want to do that. I've always known that about myself, that it was always about my team. It was not about me. It was always about, the other people around me. And now I get to do that all the time. It's about my students. It's about the people I coach. It's about the individuals. It's just a passion to help them get to some place that they never thought they could be.
Yeah, and that's the word that stood out to me. What you just said was team. A lot of people often think that they could do it by themselves sometimes, but it's not just you that you could do it by yourself. It's your team that helps you get successfully ahead in life. Because if you think you could, I've often heard like, if your dream is not big enough to ask for help, then it's not big enough. I don't know if I said that phrase right, but maybe I said that phrase right. But I've heard that before, and it's like I worked with people in school and things like that, and I'm like often like I feel like I could do it, finish it by myself, but like you can't, because sometimes you also need help, because sometimes people could bring something to the table that you couldn't bring to the table. Not necessarily say you didn't have that type of thing in you, but they can help you. Like, oh, if you was thinking about something like in the radio production or just social media or anything, oh, that might work today. So like team is a big thing that stood up.
When I was earlier, you asked me a question about those moments. There was something that happened when I was playing baseball during my college years. It wasn't at college. It was in a summer league team. And we had put together a real good team. I won't mention the gentleman's name or bring anybody into that. That's not the point. But our coach, our manager, owned the company that sponsored us. And we had a good team. And we had played like 2 games and just had gotten blown out, and everybody was thinking about quitting, and because the coach, like, he wasn't playing us in any of our positions that we normally played. He was playing a friend of his son's, in one position, and it was just like, to us, this was our life. Most of us were playing baseball in college, and we needed the summer to help us compete, when we got back to school. And he didn't really care about that. So after a game, I don't know what got into me because I was a quiet kid. I just spoke up and said, Coach, I think we're all going to quit. And he said, then go ahead, but you're not going to get the uniforms. And we turned to I don't know. I know I wasn't the only one to start it, but I started a revolt. And in about 45 minutes, I mean, we pushed the parents away. The parents weren't part of it. Us guys just got together and decided what we were going to do. And we loved our first base coach, Charlie Kafori was his name. I will mention his name. And we asked Charlie if he'd be our manager. And he said, I'll go out and get a sponsor. And he found a restaurant to sponsor us that was in his family. And we came in second that year for the national title in our division. We lost in Louisville at the end of the year. But, I mean, we knew what we had, but it took somebody to say, a college kid to go, no, this isn't right, So that was a time that I thought, you might have something here in this, you didn't do it on emotion. You didn't do it on anything but facts and logic, and you did it the right way. But you got it done, and then we backed it, which was a lot of fun.
Okay. We're gonna, before we go to break here, and shortly in two minutes, we're gonna pick one more card, and then we're just gonna ask you one more question.
Sure.
Before half break, and then after the second half, we're gonna ask more questions.
Okay. Want me to pick another one, huh?
Pick another one. Okay. All right. In one word, describe how you feel right now. And I would say today, but I would say right now. Try to connect those two, because driving here, how did you feel? And then now doing a podcast right now, speaking about yourself and not asking the person about your question, how do you feel right now in one word?
Fortunate.
Fortunate? Can you elaborate on that? Fortunate?
Sure. I'm just a very lucky person to be able to meet the people I've had. 1966, my favorite football player was Steve Spurrier. I'm sitting in his restaurant doing a podcast right now in the coach's podcast room. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The reason I like the and I like this seat better because I stare at a picture that reminds me of him in 1966. Mm-hmm. I got to interview him on this program. I get to see him once in a while in this building when he's here in the morning, and fortunate.
Fortunate, yeah. And games back then. So did you ever go to a Steve Spurrier game back then?
No. I lived in Detroit.
Oh yeah.
We used to come down. I know you're stuck on time, but we used to come down for Christmas. My grandparents spent the winter in Clearwater Beach, so we would come down for 2 weeks at Christmas. And there was no I-75 that came all the way down at the time. This is a long time ago, and so I was like, 10, 11 years old, and back then, and just to see that University of Florida, I would see it every year. I saw it when I was 5, when I was 6, when I was 7, 8, and so I started following their football team. But it was until Spurrier hit the map that I said, "Wow, I like that dude." But I was also maturing, so I could read things more, and knew where to find information. But University of Florida football was very rarely in the Detroit newspapers or on television. We didn't have but 3 TV stations, and so we didn't have the plethora of
seeing it like how we'd have today.
Oh yeah. So I had to search for that stuff. But when I would come down here, every newspaper I could get for those 2 weeks, I would try to find something that was about University of Florida football. So.
Yeah, that's a great thing. So I'm gonna let you take the end and
all right,
close us in the half.
All right, we're gonna be back in a moment. We're coming to you live from Spurrier's Gridiron Grill, inside the coach's podcast room at Celebration Point. He's Jason Bennett. I'm Bob Ganzak. We'll be right back.
We still hear it. The sound of victory. The joy of being part of something great. And while things may not be the same right now, we haven't gone anywhere. If you bleed orange and blue, then Meldon Law is the firm for you.
Looking for more reasons to celebrate? We have them here at Celebration Point. Enjoy some of the newest additions to our already celebratory lineup, like Dave & Buster's, Les Macarons, and Prime and Pearl. There's always a reason to celebrate. Join us anytime for any occasion. Celebration Point, where Gators come to celebrate.
Welcome back to Motivation U, the podcast, coming to you live from Spurrier's Gridiron Grill here at Celebration Point inside the Coach's Podcast Room. And we can't forget Visors upstairs. Great place to come and enjoy some football on television or any sport that you want to watch, really. This is just an amazing, amazing place to be, as is Celebration Point. Just a fantastic place. Today we kind of flipped the switch. Jason Bennett, one of our producers, is in front of the camera today, and he's interviewing me, so I will turn it back over to Jason.
And now my first question coming out of the half is, how do you feel today being on the other side? I know we asked it earlier, but now we're deeper into the show. How do you feel being on that side today?
Well, I didn't have to prepare. All right. I didn't have to think about the podcast or if my guest was going to show up.
Right, because the guest is definitely going to be here.
Because there's many a times that happens where I get a phone call or a text at 10:15 at night. Hey, Bob, I can't make it tomorrow. Oh, great. Like happened last week, right? So it was kind of I slept really good last night. I wasn't concerned about the podcast because I knew you would be here.
Yeah.
And the whole burden was on you. You were the one going, what am I going to ask him? What am I going to...
Right, because that's what I was doing for Tammy. I was asking Tammy. I was like, Tammy. Even from last week, I'm like, Tammy, oh, wait, I'm really on Bob's show next week, so what am I about to ask him? And I kind of knew what I was going to ask you just from what I like growing up, the simple questions that people want to know and just want to know. So it's like I was up until this day, I'm just like, Tammy. And I'm like, Tammy, help me out. And then Tammy brought out the question. The question, she sort of gave me a little more, let me breathe a little bit more. So yeah. So
You're doing a great job, by the way.
Good.
You're doing a great job.
My first podcast, so yeah.
You're doing a great job. You got a future at this.
Yeah. I'm trying.
I told Freddie that this was your guys' idea because he asked me who my guest was today, and Freddie Weeby being your boss.
Yeah.
And I said, Jason and Tammy are going to interview me. It's me on the other side. Jason's going to be the host, and he's like, wow. And I told him, I said, the kid's got. He's got moxie. He's got some talent there.
Thank you. And one day we got to get our other producer, Tammy Wynn, in front of the camera again.
Yes, she's been in this seat. I'd love to see her in that seat.
Right.
And then, because she's a brilliant person.
Brilliant, but she likes to be conservative and not be in front of the camera and not talk.
We'll work on that.
We'll work on it one day. But as we were coming out of break, we were talking about me, you and Tammy. We were talking about what what really like clicked from radio, or what person specifically put you into radio or a mentor?
So I was very fortunate. My 4 years as being an athlete at the University of Detroit coincided with Dick Vitale's 4 years of being a coach at the University of Detroit and athletic director. And we only had really main two sports. We had a third sport that was big, but it kind of fizzled out in my first year, which was fencing. We were known as a big fencing college back there, and then fencing went away as a sport, and for the most part. So we had basketball and we had baseball. And Coach Vitale is a big baseball fan. If you follow him on Twitter, I mean, you'll see that he's always making comments about things there. And so one day, I don't know, I was playing basketball in the gym or shooting around with Terry Durod, one of the players that played at the University of Detroit. I used to like to hang out there just shooting baskets with those guys. And he asked me if I would want to do something, be a stringer for Vince Doyle, like go down and get some tape from the Detroit teams were terrible back then. Okay, they were really bad. So not a lot of people. So I said sure. So I went by WWJ radio. They gave me a cassette recorder and a microphone and said, here's a pass. Go into so for a few games, I got to go into the locker room and stick a microphone up there. I never asked a question. I was too afraid. But then I would take the cassette, I would drop it off and go home. And just that was like, that put me back into that drive for radio. So that was an event that really happened, that just, it was like, this is really cool. I like that,
Yeah. Okay, coming out now, this is where we go to know, obviously, your podcast is called MotivationU. And so, I don't know if you explained this before, but many would also want to know what brought you into motivational speaking, what brought the name MotivationU podcast. So maybe if you want to elaborate on the first question, what brought you to wanting to be a motivational speaker?
Well, that, when I go back to when I was told that, you're not supposed to you're supposed to shut up, be quiet. You're a little boy, just be quiet. And I wanted to talk. And people know that I can go on and talk for a long time. But I really wanted, and that was a big part of it. And then when I got into business, our first general manager, Chuck Mefford, introduced me to the Earl Nightingale set of, Earl Nightingale was a motivational speaker, and he had a company called Nightingale Conant that they produced cassettes of motivational speakers. And Chuck Mefford gave me a couple of those to listen to, and I was hooked. I was buying them any place I could. I would find them, and and I just loved the thought that these people could get on their feet and just absolutely move a crowd. And I wanted to do that. There was no training or formal training for it. It was just, I wanted to do it. And one thing that Dale Carnegie, which is, I have to say that has probably been the biggest change in my life, was going through a Dale Carnegie class in 1991. Dale Carnegie said that if you can convey what's in your heart to your audience, that's what's most important. He didn't care about the ums and the ahs and the they'll go away. If you could take what was in your heart and transfer that to your audience, that was the key. And that has kind of stuck with me. I don't know if Mr. Carnegie actually said that. I was told that he did. But that's the whole emotion that I try to do. And I'll give you another point on that, is a huge influence on my life, People laugh at this. I tell every class this story. Huge influence on my life is Bruce Springsteen. He said something in a book when I was back in the 70s. A guy named David Marsh wrote a book about Bruce, and he told the story that when he's on stage, the reason he plays for 4 hours and gives the effort he does is that there might be somebody seeing him for the very first time. So every time I go into a class, every time I stand on a stage to talk, that's my attitude. What Springsteen's attitude is. You know, I'm going to give everything I have because this might be the only time that those individuals hear this content. And it might be the 100th or the 500th or the 1,000th time that I've given it, but for them, it's the first and might be the only. And I want to make sure that they get something from it.
And leaving an impact on them.
So long answer, but that's it.
No. Yeah, good answer, because I'm over here studying and listening to you at the same time. So could you remember or tell me, do you remember your first time speaking in front of a crowd or just first motivational class that you gave?
There's a few different times. So there's things that I spoke at Rotary clubs or events when I was in radio. I believe the first time, though, that I really knew that I could do what I was doing was when I became a Dale Carnegie instructor. Now, I had done a lot of speaking before that, mostly in my Rotary club or at radio events, different things like that. I emceed a lot of programs and did some different things. Yet when I became an instructor about 11, 12 years ago, going through that process, I thought I was good. I found out I wasn't. Yet I also learned that I had talent. And my instructors over 2 weeks of becoming a Dale Carnegie instructor taught me that I wasn't as good as I thought I was. But I was better than I knew I was. And so they took me down and then brought me back up and really helped me feel confident about myself. And it's not, you know, I talk about enthusiasm when I talk about class, and I always say this is not Red Bull enthusiasm. It's got to be a fire in your pit that just really wants to come out, and it has to be totally focused, and it has to be for your audience. And they helped me discover that about myself.
Okay. So, like, I mean, this is probably like a same down the line question, but is there a moment that when you started or a moment now, from when you started or from now, that you were talking to a class and it was like, wow, I'm really doing this and I'm really a motivational speaker and I'm influencing everybody else? Is there a moment or that you could tell us about?
Yes. So when you become an instructor in Dale Carnegie, you have to work as a tandem, meaning that you've got to work with another person. My mentor and the person that I was doing tandems with was a gentleman by the name of Herman Bowers. Herman lived here in the Gainesville area. He passed away in 2017. Awesome guy, huge Gator fan. But Herman was like my mentor. I had been a grad assistant for him many, many times. And so when I came out of our program of learning how to be an instructor for Dale Carnegie, our boss connected the two of us, and I had to tandem with Herman. The first class, he got sick. I mean, he got extremely ill, and he said, I can't do the class tonight, Bob. I'll be there. I'll be sitting in the back, but you got to do the whole thing. And I was like, we had like 35 people in the room, and it's like, I was expecting, you know,
start sweating. I know how that feels.
Oh boy, that was. But I got up. We had a great first class. He coached me after. He came to week 2. He was still sick, still couldn't teach. He came to all of the classes, could never teach that class. 8 weeks, and he could never teach it, but he was there every week for me. And it was in that moment that I understood that I could do this. Now, the big difference is that's a curriculum that I'm taught how to deliver. The challenge sometimes becomes when you're going out doing your own information, how do you don't have the Dale Carnegie world, how to win friends and influence people to fall back on as a hook to bring people in. How do you connect with those individuals? And that's just through passion, or just I put blinders on. I don't hear what anybody else is saying. I don't hear the negativity. I'm just there. I know where I want to get people to go and where they want to go, and then I just try to get them to go there.
Okay. And so now the podcast. What episode do you know? What episode of podcast is this?
We're like 45 or 50.
53.
Wow, 53.
So what made you want to start your own podcast?
So MotivationU is an interesting thing. I had probably my son. I've got to go back. My son. I have two wonderful children. My son and my daughter. I've some 7 splendid stepchildren too. My son and my daughter. My daughter is a graduate of UF and with her undergrad in journalism, like you.
When did she go? When did she go to?
She graduated from UF in 2008.
Okay.
And then she got her MBA from the University of Michigan. And my son went to the University of North Florida, but he left and started his own company. So my son works in the online world, marketing, building apps. Just you can Google him, search him, Matt Ganzak. He's got a long list of items. My daughter works for Articulate, which is they build educational online platforms. She's a senior director for them, and so my kids are really successful in this world. So it was about probably 8, 9, 10 years ago, I said to my son, I said, I would love to get the URL MotivationU.com, the word motivation and then the letter U.com. And he said, Dad, somebody's got it. He looked it up and said, somebody's got it. Crud. So about 4 years ago, he called me and he said, I just checked your URL. It's available. Do you want me to grab it? And he did. So I bought MotivationU.com. And I didn't know where it was going to go. I don't ever want to retire. So as I get older, I was always thinking that's just something I'll keep in my back pocket. And then I went and built a logo, and then I started giving some talks and, utilizing that as my moniker, and it just kept on growing. Freddie Wiebe walked up to me one day and said, you need to do a podcast. And I said, I've always thought about doing one. He says, no, you're going to start next week.
Freddie Wiebe will do that.
And so that was 53 sessions ago.
Freddie Wiebe, the man with the plan.
Yes.
The man with the plan.
And that's really important. Sometimes all of us, no matter who it is, just need a gentle nudge to get us over the edge.
I feel like you said, Freddie gave you kind of like the little push, like you need to start your own podcast. And like I feel like with you, us speaking and you getting me on the podcast today, it's like giving me a little push to be like, okay, hold on, I might want to.
You can do this.
Be in front of the mic and talk and just just go continue to do it.
It's like Josh Vaughn here,
Mm-hmm.
Josh. Do you know Josh?
Yeah.
Josh. Josh has more talent than many of us in his little fingers than we have in our whole bodies. I mean, this gentleman has got a zest and a passion for life that when you get around him, you want to be there, And I had him in class. He won the highest award of achievement in our class. And it's just that. Sometimes you just have to be given the opportunity and then explode on the scene. And that's kind of what he does to me.
Freddie, yeah. He does do that. So we're gonna go to 2 questions before we continue with our show.
Okay, sure.
Pick it up each other 2.
I keep on taking level 3. Oh, they're all level 3s.
Yeah, they're all level 3. Okay, what is a lesson you would take away from our conversation today?
A lesson from our conversation.
A lesson, a thought, just a memory, because I know these like.
I'll tell you, you're a talented young man.
Thank you.
That's the lesson I've learned.
Thank you.
That's the thought and the memory I have, is that I hope one day you're sitting behind on some network television program talking sports,
yes.
and say, there was a time that I was on a podcast.
right. That, like I asked you, what sparked you to be it? I have a lot of sparks, but my first spark, I could take this memory right now and say I was on Bob Ganzak. Ganzak. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Ganzak's podcast, and it motivated me to keep going. Like the podcast is named MotivationU.
Yeah.
and it always sparked me when I first started working for Freddie, and then I was doing the podcast. Your podcast came out. I was like, MotivationU. All right, I'm gonna sit here and I'm gonna listen to what he has to say. And there's things that you say often every other week, and that's why I ask you and I pick your brain. I'm like, okay, he motivated me to do this today. Okay, I'm not going to go home and just go to sleep today, but I'm just going to get up and I'm going to go do what I got to do, finish work. So going to a question that I had, what does motivate? Obviously, people know the definition of motivation. What does motivation mean to you, and just to get to people, elaborate to people?
Achieve your dreams.
Achieving dreams.
Yeah, achieve your dreams. So motivation to me is just putting a picture out there and then going for it, just and understand something I read one time, and I the quote that I remember in Reader's Digest was given to Marcus Allen, the great running back from USC and played for the Raiders, where he said that if you aim for the stars and you come up short, you'll be on the moon.
He's still there.
Yeah, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So sometimes our dreams, they get changed along the way, yet if you're really aiming for something high, wow, you're gonna get outside of where you are right now.
Yeah.
I never dreamed of being, I always had a dream of working and living in Florida growing up. I loved Florida. Florida was my second favorite state, even though I live in Georgia now. It's still Florida is my second favorite state to Michigan. And I just, everything I did, I listened to Jimmy Buffett music all the time. Everything I did was aimed to get me to the South. And, yep. Yankee by birth, rebel by choice, I guess,
Yeah. That's another question I wanted to ask is what brought you to Florida? What brought you to Florida from Michigan?
Well, my daughter was 7 years old. She got sick. I was running a radio station, and very successfully we were doing great in St. Joe, Benton Harbor, Michigan. And I loved it. I had life. It was the greatest life you could have. It was just, I worked for Dave Upton. Dave Upton owned the radio station. The Upton family started Whirlpool. We had great ownership. We had a great signal. We had a great format. We had great people. We had a great staff. We were all around the same age. We could have grown together. And my daughter got sick. She had juvenile rheumatoid arthritis. And after watching her for 2 years, year and a half, just struggle in the wintertime, the doctor said, you should be better off in a warmer climate. Probably Arizona, but I don't want to go to Arizona.
Arizona's hot. It's very hot.
So we came down here to Florida in 1995, and I never looked back. Now, her brother, her mother, myself, we all live in the South. My daughter lives in the Detroit area, so she, the one that we moved to the South for, she moved back up north. So.
Yeah. Before we're gonna ask some other questions. Our last question of we're not really strangers. What it says write down, but it's like, what is a goal for this year that for the rest of the year, meaning that we have two more months left in the year. Oh my gosh, the time has flown because
Yeah.
we're next week. It's November. November.
Yeah, it
1st.
is. Yep.
I can't believe that we're about to be in 2023 already. What is a goal that you are setting for the rest of the year and probably to become into the new year?
Organize my life.
Organize your life.
Organize my life. From the standpoint, I've got a lot of things that go on a daily basis, and I've not been as organized as I would like to be. Now, I've grown a huge amount in my organizational skills, yet it's one of those things that is a lifelong learning plan, and I have gotten better. This little tool right here, Remarkable, has helped me. I'm not promoting it, but it has been a great help to me. So I organize myself to be more efficient. Mm-hmm. That's one of my goals. I want to go into 2023 with a more focused attack on the year, and that doesn't just mean business. That means my family life, my health, everything about it. There's certain things I want to do. One of my goals this year was to get back into playing golf, and I did it. Yeah, so there's certain things that I want to get on the agenda next year. But right now, the next 2 months, organize my life so that I can attack 2023.
Okay, and I see it says on your iPad. Is that an iPad, right? It says,
Yeah.
don't quit. Don't quit. That's
So-
a good message to everybody.
Yeah.
Don't quit.
Well, if you see what I've done on that, that's kind of
If you want to turn it around, you can show,
A little like,
show the viewers.
a little like logo that I utilize here, which is don't quit, but if you circle out the two blue parts, it says do it.
Oh,
Okay?
you learn everything. You learn something.
So
Do
don't
it.
quit, do it.
Do it.
You know, and that's my mentality.
Mhm.
That's I'm not going to give up. I'm going to do it. Whatever needs to be done, I'm going to do it.
They need that on Mondays. Need to see that on Mondays.
Yeah.
Mondays is the
Well,
hardest day.
see, I changed my Monday to my day.
Okay.
My Mondays are my day. I don't look upon it as a Monday. Everybody, but hey, it's my day. It's not Monday. It's my day.
Mhm.
That's something you want to be proud of. You want that. You know, I want my day. So I've kind of changed when I write things in my notes to myself over the weekend. I won't write Monday. I'll write my day. So it's my day. So that's
Okay.
mine. I'm going to attack it. I'm going to make it the best it possibly can be.
I know. That's what I tell Tammy every Monday. It's like, I know sometimes it's hard for us to get it on Monday, but it's like if we get over Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, it's ready. By the time you blink, it's Friday, and we're here Thursday.
Well, I'm at the other end of the spectrum on age than the both of you. And if there's something that I could tell my younger self, and that is to enjoy every day. Too many times and too many years, I just blew through them. I didn't really live in the moment. I wished I would have learned to meditate when I was in my 20s and not in my 60s.
Meditation? Do you mean meditating like just?
Yeah.
Like
I mean,
yoga.
Spending
I don't know, yoga? Not yoga.
Yeah,
but
yoga, mindfulness, meditation, just taking I take 12 minutes every single morning with some apps that I utilize just to live in that moment. Just to say, today is today. I'm not going to let tomorrow bother me, and what happened yesterday is not going to bother me. I'm going to enjoy today. Kind of like what you said there, where you said, if we get through Monday, then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. No. Dive into Monday.
Mm-hmm.
Enjoy it as much as you can, because you only got so many Mondays.
Yeah.
I mean, there's only so many springs,
Yeah.
and everybody loves the spring, but there's only so many.
Yeah.
And my mom lived to be 93. 93 is a lot in ages, but if I gave you 93 pennies, what could you spend it on? Nothing. So it's
unless
not
you go
that
to the store.
much.
Unless you go to a little candy store with 93 cents. Yeah. I don't know. Back in the day,
Look at that.
when I lived in New York, because I'm originally from New York, I could go to a store with 93 cents and got a lot of candies and everything. But, yep.
I'd like to do this again.
We
I
can.
know we're down to the end. But I'd like to do this again. Jason, thank you for the time. Jason Bennett,
Yes,
Tammy
sir.
Nguyen, I'm Bob Ganzak. This is Motivation U, the podcast.